Have you ever wondered what happens to your mind when everything around you starts to fall apart? Not just small stress, not just everyday worries, but real pressure, the kind that lingers, the kind that follows you into silence, the kind that sits with you when no one else is around, the kind that makes you feel like something is wrong, even when everything looks normal. That quiet weight in your chest, that constant tension in your thoughts, that feeling you cannot fully explain. Today, we will explore the human mind in extreme situations. Because in those moments, something begins to change. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly, until one day, you realize you are not thinking the same way anymore. The human mind is not designed for comfort. It is designed for survival. Every thought you have, every reaction you feel, every fear that appears, comes from one purpose. To keep you alive, not to make you happy, not to make you fulfilled, not to make you at peace, but to protect you. And when the mind senses pressure, it activates that protection. In extreme situations, the brain shifts into survival mode. And survival mode changes everything. It changes how you think. It changes how you feel. It changes how you see the world. Even time begins to feel different. Moments stretch. Silence feels heavier. Thoughts feel louder. And slowly, your inner world begins to overpower your outer world. There is a part of your brain responsible for detecting danger. It does not wait. It does not analyze deeply. It reacts instantly. When it senses something unfamiliar, something uncertain, something uncomfortable, it sends signals. Your heart begins to race. Your body becomes tense. Your thoughts begin to shift. What if something goes wrong? What if I cannot handle this? What if everything falls apart? And suddenly, your mind is no longer calm. It is preparing. But here is the problem. Your brain cannot always tell the difference between real danger and imagined danger. So it reacts to both the same way. A real threat, a possibility, a thought, they can all trigger the same response. And over time, your mind begins to live in a constant state of alert. Now imagine that state continuing. Not for a few minutes, not for a few hours, but for days, weeks, longer. Something begins to happen. Your mind adapts. It stops reacting as if something is wrong, and starts accepting it as normal. This is where extreme situations become dangerous. Because when the mind adapts to pressure, it stops questioning it. You wake up tired, and accept it. You feel overwhelmed, and continue anyway. You feel drained, but keep moving. And slowly, your baseline changes. What once felt overwhelming, now feels ordinary. This is how people become stuck. Not because they cannot change, but because their mind has adjusted to the discomfort. And anything that feels familiar, feels safe. Even when it is not. Let us go deeper into stress. Not normal stress, but prolonged stress. The kind that stays. The kind that builds slowly, layer by layer, until it becomes part of your everyday life. In this state, your brain is constantly active. It does not rest. Even when your body is still, your mind is not. It replays conversations. It analyzes situations. It imagines problems. And over time, your thoughts become louder than your surroundings. You begin to live in your mind. Not in reality. You anticipate instead of experience. You worry instead of observe. You react to what might happen, instead of what is happening. This creates a loop. The more you think, the more pressure you feel. The more pressure you feel, the more you think. Until even silence feels overwhelming. Even rest feels uncomfortable. And then comes exhaustion. Not just physical exhaustion, but mental exhaustion. The kind that makes simple things feel difficult. The kind that makes decisions feel heavy. The kind that makes you feel like you are carrying something invisible, all the time. And when the mind reaches this point, it begins to slow down. Not to help you, but to conserve energy. You delay decisions. You avoid effort. You feel stuck, not because you are lazy, but because your mind is overwhelmed. Then there is isolation. Not just being alone, but feeling alone. There is a difference. A person can be surrounded by people and still feel completely isolated. In extreme isolation, the mind turns inward. At first, it feels quiet, peaceful, safe. But over time, something changes. Thoughts begin to repeat. Doubts grow louder. Memories return. Things you once ignored begin to feel important. Things you once handled begin to feel heavy. Without outside perspective, your thoughts begin to shape your reality. And the mind does not always create balanced thoughts. It amplifies what is already there. If there is fear, it grows. If there is doubt, it deepens. If there is pain, it expands. This is how isolation changes the mind. It does not create problems. It magnifies them. And over time, something deeper happens. You begin to feel disconnected. Not just from others, but from yourself. Things that once mattered feel distant. Motivation fades. Emotions feel muted. And you begin to feel like you are watching your life, instead of living it. This is not weakness. This is the mind protecting itself. When it becomes overwhelmed, it reduces emotional intensity. It creates distance, so you do not feel everything at once. Then comes fear. Not just small fear, but intense fear. The kind that controls your actions. The kind that shapes your decisions. The kind that limits what you are willing to try. In extreme situations, fear becomes constant. Not always loud, sometimes quiet, but always present. It changes how you see things. You begin to expect things to go wrong. You prepare for failure. You hesitate before acting. And slowly, your actions begin to match your fears. You try less. You avoid more. You stay where you feel safe. This is how fear becomes a pattern, not because it is true, but because it is repeated. Then there is uncertainty, the unknown, one of the most powerful triggers for the human mind. Because the mind wants answers. It wants control. It wants to know what comes next. But when it does not know, it creates possibilities. And most of those possibilities are negative. What if it goes wrong? What if I fail? What if I am not enough? And this creates anxiety. Because you are reacting to things that have not happened. You are preparing for outcomes that may never exist. And this keeps the mind in a constant state of tension. Then there is emotional overload. When too much is felt at once. Too much pressure. Too many expectations. Too many disappointments. The mind cannot process everything. So it shuts down. You feel numb, disconnected, unmotivated. Not because you do not care, but because your mind is protecting you from feeling too much. There is also something else that happens quietly. Identity begins to change. When you stay in extreme situations for too long, you begin to see yourself differently. I am not strong. I cannot handle this. This is just who I am. But these are not truths. They are conclusions formed under pressure. The mind takes temporary states and turns them into permanent beliefs. And that is where people lose themselves. But here is the truth. The mind is not fixed. It adapts. If it can adapt to fear, it can adapt to confidence. If it can adapt to stress, it can adapt to calm. If it can adapt to limitation, it can adapt to growth. But only if something changes. And that change does not have to be big. It just has to begin. Small steps, small shifts, small actions. Because the mind learns through repetition. What you repeat becomes normal. So if you repeat fear, fear becomes your normal. But if you repeat action, action becomes your normal. If you repeat avoidance, avoidance becomes your normal. But if you repeat courage, courage becomes your normal. And slowly, the mind begins to change. Not instantly, not dramatically, but gradually, quietly, until one day, you respond differently, you think differently, you act differently, and you realize, you are not the same person anymore. So take a moment, think about your life right now. Where are you under pressure? Where do you feel overwhelmed? Where do you feel alone? Where do you feel afraid? And ask yourself honestly, is your mind helping you move forward? Or is it trying to protect you by keeping you in the same place? Because maybe the real danger is not the situation itself. Maybe the real danger is staying in a state where fear controls your choices. Over time, the pain of staying the same becomes heavier than the fear of change. And that is when something shifts. That is when people finally move. Not because fear disappears, but because staying becomes unbearable. So here is something to think about. What is one extreme situation in your life right now, where your mind is reacting out of fear, stress, or uncertainty? And what is one small step you can take today to begin taking that control back? Tell me in the comments. If you enjoyed this exploration, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep exploring your hidden minds.